First is ChromaDB and Postgres. I'm using stateful sets for the databases so that the data persists. And I'm using Redis for the caching server, post my WebSocket service with the help of CloudFront, and my REST API with the help of API Gateway HTTP proxy, which then communicates with the target groups and route. The purpose of this route is to fetch the full spreadsheet data for the front end to render. It queries the file permission to verify the requesting user is authorized to read the file. Then it queries the project file to get the actual user facing file name and owner's ID. It then looks in the Redis cache. If the data is there, it parses the JSON, converts it into a 2D array format required by the front end, and returns it immediately. So you can see the real-time updates here. Created a strict composite naming convention on the backend. When you create a file, the server generates an immutable unique ID that looks like file dash plus a timestamp plus the user's Google ID. That ugly unique string is what the system uses to route WebSocket messages, fetch from the Redis, and save to AWS. Hello everyone, my name is Sujal Sharma and I'm an aspiring cloud and DevOps engineer. So today I want to present my project called Sheetwise. It took me almost 6 months to build. It's a real-time collaborative spreadsheet application. It has the real-time collaboration capabilities and AI assistant within it. It is deployed on sujalsharma.in. We will talk more about this in detail throughout this presentation. So let's first look at the tools and technologies which which are used in creating this project. First, let's start with the front end. So in the front end side, I used React and Vite for creating the user interface. For styling, I used Tailwind CSS. In the backend side, I used Node.js and Express for creating the server. I used WebSocket for the real-time communication, some file CSV libraries for converting the CSVs to JSON and JSON to CSVs. And for databases purposes, I used PostgreSQL. For caching, I used Redis. For AI API I used Google Gemini. In the DevOps side, I used Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring. I used a LangChain and LangGraph for the AI orchestration. I used ChromaDB for the vector store. I used S3 for storing the files into the cloud for the file persistence. I used Razorpay for payments, and I used NodeMailer for sending automatic emails. I used Google OAuth for the authentication, Docker for the creating images in container, Kubernetes for the container orchestration, Istio for service mesh and real-time monitoring of my deployments and services, Terraform for creating the entire infrastructure with only one command, Jenkins for CI/CD purposes. So this was all the tools I used for creating my project. So let's now move on to the features, what features my app has. So there are two kinds of features, backend features and the front end features. The backend features are those in which there is my credibility to build those features. Front end features are basically partially I can take the credit for that because that was already built-in features and I just used their APIs. So I have already logged in into my application and After that, you can go to the admin panel and you will see there is a file. It's already created over there. Whenever a user creates a new account, a file automatically gets created. So let's open it. You can click over it to open. You will be redirected directly to the file, and you can see I have already opened it before. So now you can add your content, anything into the file, and let's go to the admin panel and see what else there is. So you can see there is an add email inbox. What this can do is add the additional emails so that they can be authorized to view or edit this file. For example, I have already, I don't know if that email is signed in or not. Let's see. Oh yes. Alright, so I have already added an email, and let's assign permission. So I can assign read plus write permission over it, and I can share this file to that particular email. So let's copy this, share, and hit share. And now let's go to our inbox. So you can see as I hover over the open file button, it is redirecting me towards that file. Now you need to log in with that particular account in order to open this file. So let's sign in with the different account, the one with the file is associated. So now if I open the file again, you can see that the file has been now opened, and now this time the file is opened with the help of this account, the newly shared account, right? So now I can edit this file, and the changes will persist for both of the users. The admin of that file will always remains the one who created the file. Other than him, nobody else can become the admin of the file which was originated from that account. All right, let's move on to more features. Let's see. You can search here files. You can add more emails. All right, more than one email, and you can share. We have seen that. You can create new file. So click on the button. You see this generate name tool. You can generate a cool name with that, along with some emoji or something like that. All right, and you can add permission, and you can assign privileges and users. Now you can create the file. You will be automatically redirected to that file, and if you go to admin panel, you can see that this is our recently created file. This is the user that we assigned the privilege of read plus write. All right, you can always delete that user or re-add that user, right, and tweak around the permissions. Now there is a option called generate token. Now you can generate token for this many time, this much of time duration. Now if I click 1 minute, and if I generate token, so let's copy the link. So I can open this file, I can share this link, and the file will get open with this link for 1 minute only. After that 1 minute, the file will automatically be expired. I'll show you that after 1 minute the file will automatically get expired after 1 minute, and you will no longer be able to see that file. Now this is for the purpose if you want to share this file to a lot many users, so you can do that. Other than that, you have got spreadsheet assistant, which I will, so you can see that the token invalid or expired home page, it is automatically appeared since the token has been expired. Now I cannot reach that file, right? So let's now see more features. New file already seen. See chat, so you can collaborate with others with the help of chat. You can chat with each other. I'll show you that later on, right? You can do chat, and the other person who has opened this file will, or all the collaborators who are working on this particular file will see the chat, will see a pop-up over something here like that. And the assistant, it's an assistant for the file. It has the context of the file. Currently the file is empty, so let me upload a file. So you can, let's see, yes, you can upload a file, and that file will persist on the cloud, and you can see on the storage side how much of the storage you have used and how much is remaining. So after that you will see that the spreadsheet assistant is loading because it is embedding all the data into the ChromaDB. It's an vector database. So let's wait for some time. In the meantime, I'll show you some front-end features. So the search bar, if you want to search something, you can search over here. You can see all of the Excel like features. All right, you can insert column, you can filter, search, sort, and add or delete, remove columns, clear columns, make them read only, align them, filter them by conditions, value, and you have a lot of features about that. All right, so let's see. All right, our file has been embedded, so let's set D3 to 45. So you can see the D3 cell has been now set to 45. All right, I can give it command like translate D or maybe B5 to Hindi. It's a little bit slow because of the Google API, but yeah, you can see that it has translated. And next you can add or remove columns over here as well, but there is one more feature remaining into the spreadsheet assistant, which is highlighting the cell. So you can highlight D2 maybe. All right, so you can see that it has highlighted the B3, sorry. So you can also add and remove columns with the help of these two buttons. Remove, you can add 10 columns, and these 10 columns will also be added into the corresponding file that is opened in your collaborators team. So everybody else will also get an additional amount of rows and columns that you got added. All right, so let's add one column. So you can see one column has been added over here. All right, now you can change the theme, make it light blue, dark blue, which is, by the way, is default. Horizon light, it's green theme, kind of looks good. All right, and now it's my favorite, horizon dark. It's yellowish, it's really looks good. And the final is no theme, basically Excel like. All right, so default is dark blue. Switch it back to, then what, now let's see the real-time multi-user edit feature. So I have opened the same file into both the different accounts, and so you can see that I have opened this file into two different accounts, and I have provided the appropriate permission for that. So let's see the real-time editing in action. So you can see the real-time updates here. All right, let's see the batch updates. So you can see here the batch updates are here. Let's see the addition of rows and columns. Let's go at the very end. Let's add the rows, and here you can see that more rows are being added on both of the spreadsheet in real time. So you can see now. Let's also see the chat feature. So let's type hello. You can see that there was a pop-up hello. Let's see hello, and you can see that the chat history being saved over here. Each file has its different chat history and their own context in the spreadsheet assistant. So yeah, so let's now move on to the high level diagram of the application. There are two high level diagrams of this application. First is the Kubernetes version, which I am showing you right now. So here is the Kubernetes version of the high level diagram. So it is quite comprehensive and detailed. All right, it has two databases. First is ChromaDB and Postgres. I'm using stateful sets for the databases so that the data persists, and I'm using Redis for the caching server. and here are my deployments: Node.js, which is a REST API, and my WebSocket deployment. They both of them are exposed with the help of Nginx Ingress controller, and I'm using SSL certificates for both of them because Vercel DNS needs SSL certificate in order to connect with the backend. So it exposes two of my domains, subdomains, api.sujaysharma.in and ws.sujaysharma.in. They talk to Node.js and WebSocket service corresponding respectively. And for monitoring all of this, I have real-time monitoring with the help of Istio. So all of this are managed by GitOps, Argo CD, and monitored via Prometheus and Grafana. Grafana is used for dashboarding. All right. Move on to the high-level diagram of the AWS version of my application. So here is the AWS version of my application. Alright, so it is quite comprehensive and detailed as well. It's the cloud native deployment of my application. Alright, so I'm using CloudFront and API Gateway for my services. Since I was facing a Route 53 issue, that's why I used API Gateway and CloudFront. You can find why I was facing this issue in my Medium article. So I exposed my WebSocket service with the help of CloudFront and my REST API with the help of API Gateway HTTP proxy, which then communicates with the target groups and communicates with the services. All right, EC2 and WebSocket. So why here is this private zone Route 53? Because I was facing an issue of again and again updating the environment variable in my development phase, because I was creating cloud playgrounds on the code cloud over and over again, and I was really tired of updating a lot of environment variables again and again. So I needed a persistent variable environment variable. So I mapped postgres.tools.com and backend.tools.com so that I can actually use RDS and my Docker version of Redis and all of the tools, Prometheus, Grafana, without any need of updating environment variables again and again. All right, I used auto scaling and load balancers, and for monitoring it I used CloudWatch. And yeah, that was my architecture. So now let's move on to the low level design of my application. I'll show you the main routes of my application. All right, so let's move on to the GitHub. So the first route is API/admin. So the purpose of this route is to retrieve the user dashboard data, including all files and their sharing permissions. First, it queries the project files Postgres table using the user's Google ID to get a list of all their files. Then it iterates over these files with promise.all to query the file permissions table, fetching the specific read or write access details for any users, excluding the admin, assigned to each file. It returns a structured JSON payload of files and nested permissions. All right, let's move on to the next route, which is API/new file. So the purpose of this route is simple: create a brand new empty spreadsheet. So it checks the database to ensure the requested file name by user doesn't already exist for this user. Then it generates a unique system file name using a timestamp and the user's Google ID. Then creates a blank CSV template in memory consisting of 100 rows and 15 columns standard. Then it parses this empty CSV to JSON and saves it in the Redis cache for instant immediate access. Then uploads the buffer of the empty CSV to an AWS S3 bucket. Then it performs synchronous database inserts. It adds a record to project file and loops through an array of invited users to add them to the file permissions table. All right. Now let's move on to the API/file/file name route. The purpose of this route is to fetch the full spreadsheet data for the front end to render. It queries the file permission to verify the requesting user is authorized to read the file. Then it queries the project file to get the actual user facing file name and owner's ID. It then looks in the Redis cache. If the data is there, it parses the JSON, converts it into a 2D array format required by the frontend, and returns it immediately. If a cache miss occurs, it generates a signed URL from S3, uses Axios to download the CSV, parses it, stores the result back into Redis for future hits, and returns the 2D array. Alright, let's now move on to next route. Let's now move on to the API/file/rename route. So the purpose of this route is to update the user-friendly name of a spreadsheet. It checks the database to make sure the target name doesn't conflict with the another file owned by the user. If clear, it executes an update project files SQL query and returns the new name of the file. Alright, so let's now move on to this route called API/admin/files-file name. So the purpose of this route is to completely delete a file and all associated data. First, it checks if this is the user's only file. If so, it aborts as the system requires at least one file to exist. It then resolves the file name to an ID, deletes all the rows referencing it in file permissions and project file table. It purges the file data and token from Redis, and finally calls delete file from S3 to physically remove the object from S3 storage. Alright, now let's move on to the API/upload to S3 and load file route. So the purpose of this route is to handle files uploaded manually from the user's local computer. It intercepted by Multer to save the file to a temporary /upload folder. If the uploaded MIME type matches Excel, it uses the XLSX package to read the sheet and convert it into a temporary CSV file. The file buffer is then uploaded to S3, recorded into the project file table, granted full admin permission in the file permission table, and the temporary local file is deleted via fs.unlink sync. Alright, so let's now talk about API/file/file name write check. Alright, the purpose of this file is to produce a quick Boolean check to verify if the front-end UI should allow the user to edit the file. It just queries the database to get the appropriate permissions and then returns that permission. Let's now move on to the sharing, emailing and token access routes. So the first one is API/email. The purpose of this route is to send a copy of the spreadsheet via email. It generates a single S3 URL, uses Axios to download the CSV into an array buffer, converts it into a Node.js buffer, and calls the Mailtrap controller to send an email with a direct app link and the CSV attached as a binary. Alright. Alright, let's now see the API/admin/file/filename users/email route. The purpose of this route is to modify existing permissions for a file. It validates the file and user then runs an update file permission query to flip the booleans for read/write access and updates the assigned at timestamp. Alright. So let's now move on to the API/admin/file/filename/user/email. This route. So the purpose of this route is to revoke a user's access to a file entirely by executing a delete from file permissions SQL command. Alright, it just does this by a simple SQL query. So let's now move on to this route called API/admin/generate token. So the purpose of this route is to revoke a user's access to a file entirely by executing a delete from file permissions SQL command. So it just deletes it by the SQL query and returns that token URL expires at token to the front end, and it's the front end job to keep a time when does the file link expire. So it takes a time string like 1 hour or 1 day, converts it into second, and checks if an active token already exists in Redis. If not, it uses crypto.randomByte8 to generate a secure string, saves it in Redis with an expiration TTL, and returns a front-end URL structured as /token/file/file ID/token. So let's now move on to API/token/file/file ID/token. So the purpose of this route is to provide an endpoint public link to view the file without logging in. It looks up the token in the Redis. If it matches and hasn't expired, it checks the DB to get the Google ID of the owner, generates a pre-signed URL, S3 URL, fetches the CSV via Axios, and returns the raw file content, the user facing name, and the remaining time to live TTL. Alright. Let's now talk about the challenges that I faced during the development of my project. So the first challenge was the finding the appropriate data grid. So the first massive hurdle I hit wasn't actually the backend or the AI. It was the UI. I needed a grid, and if you're a front-end developer, you know that the React ecosystem has roughly so many grid libraries. At first, I thought I could just use AGGrid or 10stack table. They are super popular, but here is the catch. I wasn't building an admin dashboard to just display a list of users. I was building an Excel clone. I needed authentic spreadsheet-like behavior out of the box. I needed users to able to click and drag to select multiple cells, use keyboard shortcuts, drag the little corner handle to fill data down, the thing you usually do in the Excel, and right click to add rows. If I used a standard data table, I was going to have to spend months reinventing the wheel just to get basic Excel features working. I tested library after library and it was incredibly frustrating. They were either too bloated, too hard to customize or just didn't feel like a real spreadsheet. They now found then I finally found Hands-on Table. It was a total game changer for this project. Unlike the others, Hands-on Table is specifically designed to look, feel, and act like an Excel spreadsheet. It gave me the formulas, the context menus, and the cell level selection right out of the box. But more importantly, it exposed the exact hooks and the event listener I needed to intercept cell changes, which was absolutely critical for me to wire up the real-time WebSocket syncing and the AI assistant I was building on the back end. Finding the right tool for the job saved me weeks of coding, but sitting through the noise to find it was half the battle done. Alright, let's move on to the second challenge. The second challenge was consistent file naming across project. When I build a local app, if a user names their file my spreadsheet, great. I save it as my spreadsheet, but Sheetwise isn't a local app. It's a distributed system using Postgres, SQL, Redis, S3, and real-time WebSockets. I quickly realized that a file's name isn't just a label; it's the glue holding the entire architecture together. It's the Redis cache key, the S3 storage path, and the WebSocket room that users connect to. If two different users both created a file called budget.csv, S3 would just cheerfully overwrite one with the other. Even worse, if someone renamed a file while their team was actively editing it, if the WebSocket connection would lose track of the room, the Redis cache would open the data, and the whole session would just crash. I had to completely decouple that the user sees from what the system sees. To solve this, I created a strict composite naming convention on the backend. When you create a file, the server generates an immutable unique ID that looks like file dash plus a timestamp plus the user's Google ID. That ugly unique string is what the system uses to route WebSocket messages, fetch from the Redis, and save to AWS S3. The clean name you type in, that's just decorative display name stored in the Postgres database. This meant users could rename their files 100 times a day or have 10 files all named test, and the backend wouldn't flinch because the underlying system ID never changes. Now, moving on to the third challenge. The third challenge was real-time synchronization. Challenge number 3 was the beast. I had been dreading real-time synchronization. If you have ever built a basic chat app, you might think, oh, WebSockets are easy, just take the message and broadcast it to everyone. That's what I thought too, but building a real-time spreadsheet is a completely different animal altogether. My first naive attempt was sending the entire spreadsheet data to the server every time someone typed a letter. Obviously, that instantly choked the network. I realized I couldn't send the whole grid, I had to send deltas, just the tiny payload containing the exact row and the data, the exact column and the new value. But then I hit an even more infuriating bug, the echo effect. If I type the word hello, the WebSocket would send hello to the server, and the server would dutifully broadcast hello to everyone in the room, including me. So my grid would try to again upgrade while I was still typing. My cursor would jump out of the cell. I would just end up typing hello completely messed up. It was completely unusable. To fix this, I had to architect a highly specific Redis pub subsystem. When a cell changes, the frontend shoots that data delta to the Node.js WebSocket server. The server uses Redis to publish that update to a specific channel named after the unique file ID that we talked about earlier. But here is the critical part. When the server's Redis subscriber catches that message to send it to the clients, it iterates through an in-memory map of active connections, checks the ID of the person who sent it, and explicitly skips them. It updates the central Redis cache so that the truth is saved, and it updates all the other collaborators' screens instantly, but it leaves the original sender alone, getting that concurrency collaborators' scenes instantly, but it leaves the concurrency perfect, where two people can edit adjacent cells at the exact same millisecond without overwriting each other, was the hardest but most rewarding part of the entire build. Alright, let's move on to the fourth challenge: handling bulk edits. Updating one cell in a spreadsheet is easy. It takes a fraction of a millisecond to update Redis and broadcast the change, but Excel users don't just type one cell at a time. They copy and paste massive blocks of data. They drag formulas down 500 rows. They insert 20 columns at once. When I first tested adding 50 new columns, my server basically had a panic attack. My frontend was sending an update for every single new cell, and my Node.js server was firing thousands of individual JSON.set commands to Redis back to back. The network latency skyrocketed, the Node.js event loop choked, and the WebSocket connection started timing out. I realized I couldn't treat 5000 sales updates as 5000 separate network requests. I needed to batch them. The savior here was the Redis pipelines. Instead of waiting for a response after every single cell edit, a Redis pipeline allows you to queue up thousands of commands in Node.js, bundle them into a single payload, and fire them to the Redis server in a massive round trip. For example, when a user adds 10 new rows, I don't hit the database 10 times. I open a pipeline, queue up 10 JSON.command to push empty arrays to the bottom of the document and execute them all at once. By doing this massive copy paste operation that used to take 3 seconds of server lag, now resolved in exact the same amount of time as the single keystroke. It kept the real-time sync feeling instant, no matter how much data the user were throwing at it. Now moving on to the next challenge. The fifth challenge was maneuvering data shapes. To a user, spreadsheet is just a grid, but to my backend, a spreadsheet is an absolute nightmare of data formats. To make this app fast, collaborative, and AI powered, the data had to constantly change shapes depending on where it lived in the stack. For example, my frontend grid hands-on table demands data as a pure 2D array, but my in-memory cache Redis needed it as structured JSON, so I could update individual cells quickly. My long-term storage AWS needed it as flat CSV file because it's a universal standard, and my AI assistant, it can't read arrays or CSVs at all. It needs data squashed into that text string so that it can generate vector embeddings. And of course, user wanted to upload raw Excel file format. Moving data between these 5 formats without losing rows, dropping columns, or corrupting the files was a massive headache for me. I had to build a very strict data transformation pipeline on the backend. When a user uploads an Excel file, I immediately ran it through an XLSX parser to strip away the formatting and convert it to a raw CSV buffer. That buffer gets shot up to S3, then a library called FastCSV parses that buffer into a JSON object which gets stashed in Redis. Finally, when a frontend asks for the file, the server strips the JSON wrappers and sends down a clean 2D array. And for the AI, I had to write custom mapping logic to loop through the 2D array, filter out empty blank rows, and join the cells with commas so the LangChain model could actually read it. Getting this translation layer perfect is what makes the apps feel so magical. So you can upload an Excel like file and 5 seconds later an AI is reading it, a database is caching it, and your friend is editing it in the real time. Now the next challenge was spreadsheet AI and the content regulation. Challenge number 6 was giving the spreadsheet a backend. I wanted an AI assistant that you could chat with and it would actually know what was inside your data. To do this, I couldn't just copy paste the whole data grid into a prompt. I had to use LangChain to convert every row of the spreadsheet into a text document, generate vector embedding using Google's Gemini model, and store them into a ChromaDB vector database so the AI could perform similarity searches. But the second I tried to embed a moderately sized file, the system exploded. First, I hit a massive wall with API rate limits. If you try to embed 500 rows at once on a free tier API, Google will instantly block you. I had to rewrite the embedding logic to process the data in small batches of 5 and literally force my Node.js server to sleep for 2 seconds between every batch just to keep the. But the second hurdle was even more bizarre: content regulation. Modern AI tools and models are filtered. During testing, I noticed the embedding process would just randomly fail on certain file. Why? Because of the Gemini safety settings. If a user's spreadsheet had data on something like medical procedures, crime statistics, or cyber security, the AI would panic, flag it as dangerous content or harassment, and refuse to read it. I was building a data tool, not a social network. It needed to be neutral. To fix this, I had to explicitly override the safety settings. I had to manually set the harm block threshold to block none for hate speech, harassment, and dangerous content. Only then the AI finally stopped playing sensor and start doing its job as a pure data analyzer. Now moving on to the next challenge. It was session affinity and stickiness. It was completely unexpected. Challenge number 7 hit me the exact moment I tried to deploy this to the cloud. It is the ultimate. It worked on my machine and it doesn't work on your machine nightmare. When I was building the real time sync on my laptop, it was flawless. Why? Because I had to one local server running, but Sheetwise is deployed on an AWS Kubernetes cluster with multiple WebSocket ports running simultaneously to handle the load. When I first deployed, the WebSockets just kept crashing and disconnecting. I would type a cell and nothing would happen. I realized that the problem was AWS application load balancer and Kubernetes load balancer have one job: distributed traffic evenly. So my load balancer would send my initial WebSocket handshake to port number 1, but seconds later it would try to route my data package to port number 2 or the instance number 2. Now the instance number 2 had no idea who I was, so it dropped the connection. WebSocket had been bounced around. They need a permanent logged in connection to a single server. To fix this, I had configure session affinity, also known as sticky sessions, at two completely different infrastructure layers. First, I had to configure the AWS application load balancer target groups to enable stickiness, which drops an load balancer tracking cookie in the user's browser. Second, I had to configure my Kubernetes ingress and Istio virtual services to respect that affinity and always route that specific user back to the exact same Node.js port they started on. But here is the final twist. If the user A is logged to pod 1 and user B is logged to pod 2, then how do they collaborate on the same spreadsheet? That's exactly why the Redis PubSub architecture from the challenge number 3 was so critical. Pod 1 and 2 use Redis as a central bridge to talk each other, ensuring the WebSockets stay stable without sacrificing scalability. Now let's move on to the final challenge. It was Nginx routing a request to different backends to make Sheetwise as fast and scalable as possible. I didn't want my real-time WebSocket traffic getting bogged down by heavy tasks like AI embedding or file upload. So I split my backend into two completely separate microservices. One Node.js service for standard REST API calls, which does all the authentication and file handling stuff, and a second Node.js server dedicated purely to WebSocket. But when I deployed this to my Kubernetes cluster behind Nginx, everything broke. The REST API worked fine, but the WebSocket were instantly rejected. Why? Because reverse proxies are naturally suspicious. A WebSocket connection doesn't start as a WebSocket, it starts as a normal HTTP request that knocks on the server's door and says, "Hey, I want to upgrade this as a persistent two-way connection." It does this using specific HTTP headers called connection upgrade and upgrade WebSocket headers. But by default, standard reverse proxies strip these headers out. They treat it like normal temporary HTTP request, effectively slamming the door in the WebSocket's face. To fix this, I had to become the traffic cop. I had to write highly specific Kubernetes ingress. So I configured the proxy that if the traffic came in the came in and asking for /API, it got routed to the REST backend. If it came in with those specific upgrade headers, the proxy and instructed was instructed to preserve the headers, formally upgrade the connection from HTTP to TCP, and safely route that persistent tunnel strictly to the WebSocket ports. And this was my list of challenges while I was building my application.